Why you should build your own game engine. When I set out to make my own game engine, I watched this. Watch it again. When I started my journey, I watched this video to figure out whether I should make my own game engine, because in my case, I started with Unity. I tried to make a Witcher 3 clone. I know. Small project to begin with, you know, it's just a Witcher 3 clone. It's like, you know, anyone could do it. I failed. Okay, I failed. And then I was like, maybe that's easier in Unreal Engine. So I tried doing Unreal Engine. And then I got stuck on about 1,500 shaders compiling for more than 4 to 5 hours. And this is when I told myself that F this, we're going to make an engine. And I wanted to know whether it is a good idea. And so I came across this video, which is now posted 4 years ago, more than 4 years ago. And I watched it. And then made a decision based on that video, or maybe not. But I totally do not remember any of the points in the video. But, you know, why not rewatch it and see if I still agree with those points? Because ultimately, as you can tell, I did make my own engine. I did make my own game in C and C++. And in my opinion, this was the best decision that I've ever done.
Let's talk about some important distinctions when using the term game engine.
Game
engines are sometimes conflated with frameworks. For instance,
frameworks are basically STL2, Raylib, or SFML. They give you functions to draw chords, to do audio, to gather input. But they don't give you a nice little interface that you think of in Unity where, oh, I'm gonna place this guy right here. You know, you have the gizmos, you drag it on the X and Y axis, maybe on the Z axis, and then you place a sound on top of that, prefab or whatever you want to call it.
GLFW is a framework which provides input, rendering, and multi-monitor functionality. GLFW stands for Graphics Library Framework. Another framework, used to make both Dead Cells and Northgard, is called heaps.io. They call themselves a game engine, but they do not provide the slew of tools which many users come to expect from game engines if their experience is with Unreal, Unity, and Godot.
Okay.
Heaps.io may instead be considered a high-performance rendering framework. Even big game engines will offer
but what does this have to do with building your own game engine?
libraries in other frameworks. For instance, Unity implements a layout engine called Yoga for its UI, which was created by Facebook.
It's called Yoga? Really? Like, isn't Dev Spudges constantly on the edge and crying about the Unity UI?
You don't have to build it all, but you can. To build a game engine, you do not have to make everything from scratch. That is not to say that you can just stitch things together and call it a day. There will still be software architecture and serious programming involved. You decide on the level of complexity required.
That's actually a good point. If you decide to use STL2, for example, you could decide to use the audio from STL2 and then you do the graphics yourself because maybe you don't want to deal with Windows audio and maybe X Audio 2 or Direct Sound. You don't want to do that. You could use STL. Use the parts only, you need only, yeah. Go.bad.
If you want to write a 3D rendering library from scratch, you can. You can also choose not to do that, and instead leverage a rendering framework which already exists. You may be thinking, okay, then why not just leverage an existing game engine? Well, the difference here is one of scope.
Well, the existing game engine forces you into their way of doing things. A framework allows you to place the code in blocks that you want to. While they force you to use their way of, let's say, doing graphics, they give you an interface. But a game engine forces you, they essentially force you everything. Oh, Jackie Couch, thank you very much for following. Good morning. It's fine, it's fine. Thank you so much.
You want to draw stuff on the screen. A rendering framework will allow you to do just that and nothing more, allowing you to focus on building the systems required, rather than learning the...
There's one caveat about the rendering framework, okay? I always say that. Please build your own abstraction for your own rendering framework if you use that. You want to create an interface that is your own interface that calls the STL functions or the Raylib functions. Because then whenever you decide that that doesn't work for me, because that can happen. You know, because everyone is inexperienced that does this, that is new to this. You can decide that, oh shit, man, I hate SDL2. I don't want this anymore. Then it is easier for you to exchange or change these function calls in your interface in, let's say, 10 places, 5 places, instead of 100 places, because you're calling the draw call in 100 different places for UI, for units, for enemies, for some clutter in the world, foliage, stones, whatever you want to call it. You know, you have so many different draw calls in your game, and it's easier to have that then interfaced, that you can abstract this away, that's abstracted away, and then you can just change those like 5, 6 function calls that you have abstracted away. And then it's also easier because you have your own interface, your own data that you supply to these functions. And let's say maybe you don't like the interface of ArrayLib. It requires certain specific vector data or some other data. You can pass in your own data and you always conform to your own data. I would highly recommend doing that, and the same with audio or any other system that you use. It makes exchanging these libraries and testing out different libraries that much more simple, and you will have a much easier time. And it doesn't take that much time to set this up, but it gives you a huge flexibility boost, okay? If you spend skill points when you level up as a programmer, you should put some in flexibility. I'm telling you, it will help you.
Tools. Okay, now you want some simple animations, but you do not need blend trees, animation subgraphs, and all the other bells and whistles. Well, you can just write a few functions which handle easings and timings, and that's it. Is it general purpose and able to handle all cases? No. But that is fine, because you only need to cover the cases required by your...
I mean, I could go into so much detail. I don't know if I go into too much detail, guys, tell me. But for example, easing functions, right? Easings.net. Take a look at this. It shows you the curve. I can make it a bit bigger. This is one of the best curves website. You take it like, let's say, ease out cubic. You want to have this in your game? Easy. Click on this. This is the function right here. Copy this over, and depending on what type of code base you use, C++, C, I don't know, Zig, Odin, put it in your game and done. You have an easing function right here. I guess I don't have it, but I have quad. Boom, now you have an easing function. Very nice. After power killing your performance, listen man, don't talk about performance when you don't know what your game is about. You can only know that when you call it a lot of times. If you call it like one time a frame, it's not gonna impact your performance at all.
More tools do not mean better solutions. Most games built in general-purpose game engines do not use a fraction of the features provided.
Is that Frostpunk? No, it's Northgard, okay.
The tools given to you in these game engines will sometimes cause you to come up with strangely hacky solutions, which produce inconsistent results. For instance, I have seen people using the Unity animation graph as a general-purpose state machine for their game logic.
Okay.
It's an interesting approach. But now
isn't the Unity animation graph where you specifically state certain animation states, like idle, attacking, and walking, and then you drag arrows between the different states, and you add conditions to the arrows when you swap. And that can get out of hand very quickly. Finite state machine with transitions, yes. I found this to be very easy to use, actually. I know it can get out of hand with all of these different arrows pointing everywhere. You know, it's like a spider web. But I found this really cool, actually. I liked it.
Coupled to this UI system, which only exists inside
very
the
powerful
Unity
also,
engine editor.
Yeah. Easy to approach. Can grow out of hand with complex system, but yeah, for simple things, it's fine.
Game engine plus game is not equal to game engine. There is a considerable difference between building a game and engine from scratch versus building a game engine with no idea in mind. When designing an engine to build a specific game or type of game, you can be absolutely ruthless with feature cutting.
True.
Only implementing the features which the game requires to function.
True. That's actually true.
Conversely, when you are building a game engine designed for public consumption or for creating games of unknown types, you must implement orders of magnitude more features.
Exactly. I think this is the best when we talk about this in comparison with Unity. Have you guys ever used particles in Unity? And you have, I don't know, maybe try to make a particle that moves up, like it gets shot out and then it flies in a curve, like a water fountain kind of particle. Now this particle system, such a particle system, requires a bunch of different fields. Okay, and I've made, obviously in my games I have particles too, but I don't have nearly as many options for my particle systems as Unity does, because I don't need them. I don't need to have such a fine-grained control over how I change my particles over time, because the need has not arisen yet. And that's the difference between an engine and a engine made for a game. The game will dictate what this data will be. The engine itself is more specific to my game, but it also gives me the option to extend this. And in Unity, you don't have the option to minimize this at all. It tells you this is what is needed. Mostly everyone wants to have this, and you're going to use that and nothing else. Unless you build your own particle system in Unity, of course. A lot linear, no bloat. Yeah, there's also no bloat. It's a lot linear, and you can change it to your liking to fit your specific case. Exactly. There's so many specific things in my game that, yeah, let's not go too much into this. It will be like 10 hours React. I hate it.
Decide to make game engines for their games can go seriously.
Sorry about this. Let's move
games
back.
Of unknown types. You must implement orders of magnitude more features.
Yeah.
This is where people who decide to make game engines for their games can go seriously wrong if they are not careful.
Exactly, you can scope creep out of oblivion, but this is also why the journal realized that making a game engine is actually really hard and takes a lot of time. And if you don't believe me, there's actually a video of the journal. What is it? What it takes to release a game engine. I think this is it. Hazel release. It might be this one or something else. I don't remember.
One can end up implementing a bunch of features just in case and end up wasting a lot of time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
If you're planning to make a game and write the engine from scratch, be aware that the engine design should echo the game design. For example, if you're making a 2D side-scroller, there is no need to have a first-person camera with perspective implemented in your engine. You are never going to be utilizing that. You decide the programming language. Language choice can be important for a few reasons which we will go into shortly. But first I want to speak about one reason why it's not important, and that is learning the language. Programming languages can be picked up pretty quickly once you have a decent amount of experience in one language. Learning a new language and its particular features are trivial in comparison to the other reasons why being able to choose the programming language matters. There are some more hurdles involved in going from something like JavaScript to Haskell, as they are very different. Nevertheless, all programming languages are just a way of letting the programmer know what is going on in the computer's memory. Being able to choose the language means you can choose what you already know and build off of that knowledge. I decided not to do that and instead to learn C at the same time as creating an engine because I wanted to know more about memory management. However,
that's actually a smart idea. You learn a lot if you do this. It's a steep curve. It's like a huge mountain when you start this, but you learn so much valuable information. It's crazy. And C doesn't give you any of the C++ constructs, so you have to deal with memory allocation, deallocation, and managing that. You know, it's really cool. And I can still, I recommend Handmade Hero for that. It's a very nice starting point. Intro to C on Windows. Google that, you will find Handmade Hero. It's a really cool playlist, and it teaches you a lot about memory as well. It's awesome.
It's more comfortable for you and a better use of your time, you can just stick with whatever language you already know.
Also, the advantage of C is that it's simple. It's the most simple program. It's basically, in my opinion, let's not talk about macros, okay? Not talking about that. It is basically pseudocode. Easy pseudocode. That's what C is.
Knowledge, you can develop tools to help you with your subsequent projects and gain a deeper understanding along the way. Then in your next game project, you will have multiple tools, libraries, or modules to leverage, and you will know exactly how they work and what their uses are. If you are a web developer with mostly JavaScript experience, then you can leverage that and build a game in JavaScript. There are numerous examples of games and engines written in JavaScript. Crosscode, a top-down action role-playing game by Radical Fish, is written in JavaScript. The developers took the game engine Impact.js and heavily modified it.
Vampire Survivors was written in JavaScript, guys. Huge game. Huge game. Massively successful.
To achieve their goals. They have a number of technical blog posts on their website which you can check out.
Was.
You
It is now in
decide the
Unity.
paradigm.
Okay, guys, let me clarify. It was JavaScript. It is now in Unity. They converted it to another language. Yes, they converted it, but it started out as JavaScript. Vampire Survivors. You can run the game here. It's like one of the very first versions. It's JavaScript. You see that? We have like 4 heroes. You can confirm, and I think it's 1 level. Yeah. That's essentially where it began. It's actually the most difficult version, in my opinion, because the start of this is you only have 1 slot. It's loud as fuck, man. I think it blew up on Steam. Yeah, you're right. It didn't blow up on itch, but it blew up on Steam. It's really cool. If you want to play Vampire Survivors for free, you can go there. That's how it began. It's a really cool game.
Object-oriented, procedural, structured, functional, insert programming style here. Whatever style of programming you want to use, you can. With the big 3, Unity, Unreal, and Godot, you are locked into their way of doing things. You can fight against it, of course, but then you are struggling with the very tool which is intended to make your life easier. If most of your experience is...
I wanted to add to this, though, one last thing that I think is important to point out here. You should always try to start with a game engine first. Let's say Unity, Unreal Engine, or Godot. Start with one of these game engines and then see if you like it or not. I started with Unity. And after 3 months of no progress, fighting with the systems and feeling more or less terrible about myself, I figured out for myself that this is just not what I will use in the future to make games. But I still started with Unity. And I think it's important to point that out because you need to make that experience. You shouldn't go without at least giving them a try. Even if they have their way of doing things, you might enjoy the process still. That is not a bad thing.
Programs a specific way and it does not have too negative an impact on performance. We'll get into performance shortly. Then you are free to continue writing in that style.
Hello,
when using an
good morning,
opinionated
man.
engine, you run into the issue of fighting with the tools repeatedly, unless you decide to conform to its standards, which I should mention is an entirely valid strategy.
Yeah.
You can refactor for performance. Without access to the game engine's internals, you may be at a loss to improve the performance of your game past a certain point. If you're a solo developer or a small team, chances are you won't be going for hyper-realistic graphics and utilizing the latest features 3D graphics has to offer. However, you may be creating something like a city building game or a colony management game. These types of games can be deceptively performance hungry, as there may be tens or hundreds of thousands of calculations happening each second.
Yeah, you're probably CPU bound. I have that in my game too, and I don't do many calculations. I have a simple tower defense game, but yeah, CPU bound
Unity,
is a
for
big
example,
problem.
you're at the mercy of not just the engine architecture, but also the C# garbage collector. For anyone watching or listening who does not know what I am talking about, I'll give a brief summary of what a garbage collector is. Some languages allow you to do manual memory management. If you have 100 objects in the scene, they can be anything, but let's take an example like units in a real-time strategy game. When 90 of these units are killed, you don't want them hanging around, taking up memory and potentially still having calculations done to them. So you call something like delete on the unit objects. If the language is garbage collected, all this does is mark the objects for deletion until the next time the garbage collector runs, which you cannot reasonably control.
No, the garbage collector
I
is
say
its own
reasonably
thing.
because there is a method to force the garbage collector to run, but it is a considerable performance cost.
Yeah, oftentimes, like speaking from experience, most people that come here, they talk about how they are fighting with the garbage collector instead of conforming to it. It's oftentimes an issue for them. It's essentially what it means is, let's say you have an enemy, you spawn an enemy, you need some memory for that enemy. Of course, it has data. And then you allocate that memory, and then all of a sudden the enemy dies at some point further down the line, right? And then you, as he said, mark that enemy as deletion. In C++, you would just free the memory, or you have some other way of dealing with this allocation. And then in a memory managed language, like let's say C#, the garbage collector will then at some point run and clean up that memory. And that is how potentially, if you forget to mark it as deletion or something, you can still find ways to somehow leak memory. And the best example, unfortunately, is the game from Thin Matrix, Equilox, where it is written in Java, garbage collected memory, not memory, garbage collected language, still has memory leak issues, unfortunately. So yeah, unfortunately that is an issue. But it doesn't always have to be that. There's many great games written in C#, Java, all over the place.
As it goes through every object in the program and checks if it needs to be removed. If the language is not garbage collected, you must explicitly free up the memory. The difference is that it is instantaneous and only regards the objects you want to free from memory.
Yeah, but you can make a lot of mistakes here.
That is just one example of where your hands may be tied. The scenarios will differ depending on which engine you are using.
Like Minecraft. Minecraft is Java, yeah? Or was. I think they changed it, did I?
If you're the kind of person who feels compelled to create even when you could be relaxing, you'll understand what I mean by this. Practicing and getting better at programming is not only joyous, but it is also necessary. Spend too many nights in a row watching Netflix or playing video games, and you'll start to get that feeling in the back of your head. The one that drives you to create and explore. The one that tells you are wasting your time. As soon as you dive into an old project or start a new one, you'll lose yourself and become one with time and space.
Interesting.
At least until your phone vibrates and knocks you out of the flow state. Tip: turn off your phone during deep work. Writing a game engine has its challenges, and that's a good thing. When you practice your craft and challenge yourself, you improve rapidly.
This guy's bad.
The sphere of computer programming is so expansive that no one person can be all-knowing. That doesn't mean you can't try. Knowledge for knowledge's sake is a valid philosophy. Every time you sit down and work on your engine, you are making progress towards not just finishing the engine and/or your game, but towards a better version of yourself. Conclusion. Building an engine gives you complete control and knowledge of the inner workings. It will force you to learn about a whole bunch of things which you might not have otherwise touched on.
Surface level shit show code, bro.
Be crazy hard. There are frameworks and libraries for all sorts of things. Rendering, asset importing, audio, input, displaying text, physics, linear algebra, and many more. I intentionally did not go into the circumstances under which you should not build a game engine, as they have been cited and rehashed all over the internet. Make sure to read or listen to the other side of the...
I think you should have done that, to be honest. Like, you can't only just put points pro for game engine and not go into the negative ones. It's like a balance of positives and negatives. One big negative is time investment. You should do that
as well. I have learned more about programming and how computers work in the last few months than in the entirety of my development career. A big caveat here is that I was a web developer, not a game developer.
Me too, yeah. I started out as a web developer as well.
If you find yourself in a position where building an engine seems viable, you should certainly consider it. I cannot tell you if it's right for you, but I can tell you that it was right for me. If you made it to the end...
I think you only know if it's right for you when you see some results. Whether that be a job application that works out for you or a game that you have made picking up traction on Steam and getting somewhat nice reviews, and it is somewhat stable on other systems. Because that is ultimately the biggest issue that you will run into with C++, making games for other platforms and then having them run on on a bunch of different systems. I think that is the most difficult that is the most difficult task.
Thank you for listening or watching. Let me know if you're building your own engine or if you completely disagree with me. Just leave a comment below. If you like the video, please leave a thumbs up, as it does help the channel. If you dislike the video, please leave a thumbs down, as it also helps the channel. And if you have a particular point
I disagree with Cakez. Leave a comment, Cakez.
Leave a comment about that. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then make sure to subscribe. I'll have one of these every Wednesday, and
I love Stardew Valley.
Another engine programming video every Sunday. Catch ya.
Really cool. Yeah, Stardew Valley is sorted, by the way. Every single thing that you see here is sorted and then drawn. Like the video, Cakez? Yeah, we will like the video. It's very generalized, of course, but it's also difficult to go into a lot of specifics. In the future, I will make such a video myself, but only after I have finished my game. This is the video, guys. If you liked it, and you want to support him, he has actually made a tutorial on YouTube how to make a game. Game engine in C++ was actually really successful 2 years ago. Would you consider Raylab an engine in that context? Where's the line? Raylab is a framework. I don't consider any library an engine. What I consider as an engine is a general purpose program that you start to build your game in.